Hello! It's been a little bit longer than planned between episodes, a hiatus brought on by life events, as will occasionally occur. I'll go into a little bit more detail in the closing credits if you're interested, but for now, let's get on with the next of my PlayStation VR 5-minute reviews. Bound is not a PSVR game. Or rather, it's not a game that was designed for VR. So the question is, how well does a game that was designed with traditional platformer controls in mind, standard floating camera setup and all, convert to VR? And on top of that, is it a decent game in the first place? Well, let's deal with that first point first. The footage you've just been watching is in the game's standard non-VR mode. Let's switch to VR and see how things change. Ignoring the sudden change in display formatting, thanks PlayStation Share functionality, there's one big difference that stands out here: the camera behaviour. While the robot rescue minigame in the Playroom VR suite shows that you can implement a traditional follow camera in VR, at least so long as the game is reasonably sedate in pace, Bound goes for something else entirely. It goes for a camera type that's actually been out of fashion since, about the mid-90s. This is the drop camera solution, that is to say, a static camera that you can teleport close to the main character at will, whereupon it remains stationary until you next teleport it. It's a camera type I best remember from the 3D action-adventure Little Big Adventure 2, where it was something of a pain, but more or less unavoidable in pre-analog joypad era PC games. Incidentally, if anyone fancies bringing Little Big Adventure 2 to VR, that would be quite nice. Or even a Little Big Adventure 3? You know, just in case Frédéric Reynal is listening. Actually, Fred, if you are listening, I can only imagine how brilliant Toy Commander would be in VR, but I digress. Where the static camera was a frustratingly limited experience in the early, expansive 3D adventure game, with you regularly having to teleport the camera just to keep the character in view, here getting obscured behind an object only necessitates a physical change of position from the player to rectify. Meanwhile, the static camera and reasonably slow pace of the game allows you to really take in your environment, to look around and experience the, quite frankly, gorgeous environments in a way you could never do with a more traditional camera solution. It just works astonishingly well, and makes me look forward to future games designed with this sort of camera in mind. A platformer designed from the ground up to take advantage of such a control scheme could be quite a thing. So, VR is integrated really surprisingly well in Bound, but what's it like as a game? Well, taken on its merits as a pure platformer, it's a little basic. This is no game of complex, pixel-perfect jumping and timing, and it's just as well because the controls are a little too mushy to support that. And indeed, if there's one thing that the VR camera doesn't lend itself to, it's fast-paced, precise platforming. So it's just as well that the developers were aiming for something else, as players are likely to be clued into by the game's framing and the protagonist's moveset. The platforming plays out over a series of abstract dreamscapes relating to a book being read by a heavily pregnant lady at the seaside. If that all sounds overly arty and pretentious, it really isn't. Instead, this is a game which takes advantage of its stylings to tell a story with subtlety, its abstract visuals and fragmentary memories allowing for an implied narrative rather than the more traditional approach of beating the player over the head with exposition. As for the moveset itself, well, this is about the only game I can think of with a dedicated dance button. In combination with standard movement options, jumping and ducking, you'll find yourself hopping, pirouetting, sweeping, and, well, bounding through the environments. If you've ever wondered what playing through a platformer as a ballet dancer would be like, this is the game to try. Because of all this, those mushy controls I mentioned before become much less of an issue. That movement always feels a little heavy makes perfect sense when your every motion is accompanied with a dancer's flair, and the lack of focus on challenging platforming is fine when the game's driving force is its environments and narrative. Of course, if you are after a purer platformer, a new Mario, this isn't the game for you. But if the idea of exploring alien spaces and driving a story along appeals to you, Bound does an excellent job. I've already mentioned how VR helps you to really experience the environments you're in, to look around them as a visitor, not merely someone sat on the other side of a screen. It should be obvious from the footage, but Bound's landscapes are sumptuous, all undulating polygons shot through with bold block colours and populated with strange creatures and obstacles. It's an environment that manages to be captivating even as a watched experience, but it becomes even more dramatic and engaging when experienced through VR. This is a game about travelling through a daydream, about reinterpreting the world through a dreamscape. It should be no surprise that VR, as close as we've come to induced artificial dreaming, is so perfect for it. Bound is a lovely adventure platformer, elevated greatly by VR. If that sounds at all interesting to you, you owe it to yourself to try it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. As mentioned in the introduction, there has been a bit of a hiatus between episodes, just over 2 months worth in fact. This was down to a mix of different events, some personal, some work related, plus some simple things like Christmas and my birthday getting in the way. Most of the aforementioned issues have now been resolved, and while a handful are still ongoing, I'm hopeful that my next video should reach you within the month. So hopefully I'll see you then.